Welcome, everybody. This is Collective Mind Community Conversations today on the topic of nested networks. We're so pleased to have you all here. I am chatting a link to you all for the shared slides today. Those are the slides that I'll be going through, and they're interactive, so I will be asking you to check in a minute. So moving on to slide 2, the agenda for today. So I'll just do a very, very quick overview of Collective Mind for those of you that are new to us. And while I'm doing that, I'll ask you each to use some slides to go ahead and check in so we know sort of the composition of participants, where you all are at, and sort of your take on the topics a little bit. And then I'm going to go over a little bit about sort of how you responded to some registration questions, and then that's just going to lead us right into the conversation, which is meant and designed to be very interactive. So we want to hear from all of you as well about your experience, your take, your reflections on nested networks. So with that, I'm moving on to slide 3. So I'm Seema Patel. I'm a senior advisor with Collective Mind. Basically, everything that we do is around working with networks, both the network practitioners who work for and with networks, and then just working with networks writ large. Our primary way of doing that is through our consulting and advisory services. So we have a team of global consultants. They're spread across the world. And we all work to support networks on strategy, strategic planning, network design, facilitation, capacity development, et cetera, sort of the whole gamut of activities and challenges and opportunities around networks. Basically, we do all of that. I would love for you all to, yes, let me share the link again. Maybe while I'm continuing, if you could look at slides 4 onwards, I think it's 4 through 8. Just go ahead and check in your name, your organization or network, where you're located, and then just a quick response about whether or not you work within a network, however you interpret that. And you can spread out. We've got a couple of slides on that. So I'll keep going. So yes, so Collective Mind, again, we do it mostly through our consulting advisory services, but also through these type of community conversations and various learning opportunities and sessions that we hold, in addition to our professional development opportunities. We're really trying to build both a community of practice and a field of practice. So that's really our intention with the other side of our activities, aside from our consulting. And then we have a number of resources that I'll go over a little bit more about both our learning community and resources at the end. So again, as new people are joining, I'm just going to continue to chat the slide link into the chat window. And you can go ahead and check in on slides 4 through 8, just so that we know sort of who's in the virtual room with us today. So let's go ahead and check in that. Okay. Some enthusiastic yeses for being part of nested networks. That's great. And also, yeah, a lot of folks from different parts of the world. Wonderful. Okay, great. Well, continue to check in. I'll keep asking more folks to do that as others join. So you were asked 2 questions when you registered. So we wanted to kind of get a baseline understanding of what a nested network means to you, and then if you currently work for one, what your challenges were. So I just quickly summed up what folks responded to, just to try to get sort of your starting perspective. So I'm on slides 8 and 9 right now. So we had sort of a very interesting mix of responses and understanding of what nested networks are. And that's not to say that there's just one definition, but we had different people sort of thinking about networks in the same way that Collective Mind and our panelists think of nested networks, which is a bit of a tongue twister, that there are networks hosted by a particular organization, a network that hasn't yet taken off on its own. Some people thought of them more akin to a network of networks. Some people responded that they just weren't sure. Actually, we got quite a few responses from people saying that they'd never heard of them, and that's why they were coming to today's session. And a lot of not a lot, but at least a few people said that alumni networks is what they think of when they think of nested networks. So I'll leave these up here, but that's just sort of a very quick summary of what you all thought of as a starting understanding of what nested networks are. And then we also wanted to know what was top of mind for you in the context of nested networks. So again, a gamut of responses, and many of them are not just specific to nested networks, but they're common challenges for anybody who works for and with networks. They're very common challenges writ large, which definitely makes sense. Let me chat the link again. So if you're just joining, you can go ahead and check in on slides 4 through 8 of that deck. So what's top of mind for people are issues around when you're working within a nested networks, there's a lot of complexity. There's both a host and the nested network itself. So that can at times compete for members' time and attention. Issues around promoting self-sufficiency and the direction of the network. A bit of conflation between objectives, engagement, and responsibilities. Member engagement is something that comes up literally in every learning session that we hold, no matter what the topic. And then some other ones around cohesion and tracking impact, sustainability, making the network visible, challenges around facilitating partnership and collaboration. So again, it's a range of understanding and a range of issues. And I think we'll spend a little bit of time hearing from our panelists and hopefully you to just get a bit more of an understanding of how you're experiencing nested networks and try to unpack it just a little bit. And I think I'll just ask if you could mute if you can, and I'll try to do the same for our folks. Great. So I think that is a perfect segue into our conversation, which is what we want to spend most of our time doing today is conversing. I'm going to ask our two panelists to share their experiences with us. I'm also going to be leaving space and pausing to have you all share your experiences. I'm going to ask a couple of questions and I'll include them in the chat, but we'll have the panelists share their experiences, their insights, their reflections, and then any of you can jump in, raise your hand, unmute, use the chat to share your reflections and insights on that particular question as well. Let's have it be as interactive as possible. And then we'll also have time for just, a free-for-all Q&A towards the end. So with that, I'm going to move it over to our panelists, and I'm just going to start with a question, and then whoever responds, just go ahead and introduce yourselves and give a bit of a primer on yourself. So we have a little bit of an understanding now of what nested networks are, sort of based on our collective experiences. But I'm curious to know what each of you, can you both, sorry, hold on, I'm trying to multitask here. Give us a quick primer on how your individual nested networks came to be, and just kind of talk that process through a little bit. So whoever's ready, you can go ahead and get started.
I know Motunrayo is coming from a stream of calls, so I'm going to give her another few minutes to collect her thoughts. But hey, everyone, I'm Annalina Kazickas. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm calling in from Seattle, Washington on the West Coast of the US. And the network that I help steward is called the Food Systems Leadership Network. And it is part of a larger, it's interesting in this term of nested networks because we are part of an organization called the Wallace Center, which operates nationally within the US. And that Wallace Center organization is actually then part of a larger international development agency that operates internationally. So a little bit of like multi-layered nesting, which adds to both some complexities and challenges as well as some opportunities there too that we'll talk a little bit more about. But the Food Systems Leadership Network really emerged. It was launched in 2018 after several years of research into the food system in the US. We were trying to find out what different organizations were doing around the country to advance local and regional food systems, to create more connections between small local farmers and the communities that they were serving, moving healthy food, local food into communities at affordable prices. And so through that research, we got a lot of talking. We figured out that there are a ton of organizations and people doing this work, but they were still a little siloed. There was no one main body for folks to tap into for support, for resource development, for leadership development, professional development. And so the Wallace Center saw this as an opportunity to create that centralized space. So we then launched the network as a vehicle to connect individuals to advance systems leadership, to really support the technical learning that is required for food systems work. And we are now 5 years into our lifetime as a network. And within that, definitely seeing some movement and some shifting happening because networks are alive, they are breathing, and they must shift and evolve. And we are now sort of entering that like next step and next phase of a network, which I'll probably talk about a little bit later. But yeah, that's a little bit of overview about how we emerged. And I guess my role, I work with a team of 4 or 5 other people to steward the network. We're all employed by Wallace Center at Winrock International. And each play a role in program development, network engagement, communications, really just all wearing a bunch of different hats, which I'm sure a lot of you all here are familiar with if you work in networks.
Seema, shall I also answer this question? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Motunrayo Fagbayi. I am the Education Champion Network Program Officer. I am based in London. And to talk a bit about the Education Champion Network. So this is a network that is hosted by Malala Fund. We are a global organization, and the network came about in 2017. It was something that I would say kind of Malala Fund created based on the experiences of our co-founders, Malala and Ziyadeen Yousafzai, on as education activists in Pakistan. And the idea of the network is that it is a growing global network of education advocates and activists who are working locally and nationally to advance girls' secondary education. And so many of our, the network is made up of many kind of education advocates and activists who are trying to basically break down barriers to girls' education in many different ways. So this can be at community level and tackling social norms. This can be policy, working with government, and girls' education has many complex barriers to it, but the network is made up of people who are trying to tackle that. I guess the other thing to say is that at the national level, our network is made up of chapters, and so education advocates, they come together nationally to do collective advocacy. And so there's a lot of collective advocacy that comes mostly around sort of policy change or at critical junctures. So at the moment, we've had our Brazil chapter and our current Nigeria chapter engaging in election advocacy, for example, because that's kind of very relevant for them at the moment. So just to kind of say again, that's how the network came to be. It was as organic as it can be, as in that it was kind of something that was inspired by our co-founders, but very much hosted by Malala Fund. And there is the network also involves sort of grants that we give to organizations, kind of peer learning for the organizations and the champions that are involved, collective advocacy that I mentioned. But yeah, I think we can maybe talk a bit more about the complexities of, having a network. As Annalina said, networks are breathing and they're changing, and as they're growing and more people come with their ideas, because ultimately our network is made up of people who have expertise already. And, although the network and Malala Fund were all focused on this main mission around girls' education, in each country, contexts look very different. And so it's kind of, how do we create space so the network can kind of shape itself and where it's going? But I'll pause there before we kind of continue. And I don't know if there are any questions or anything that I didn't answer in that question.
Luz, I saw that you unmuted. Did you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I would first like to ask for a favor, if you may try and speak a little bit more slowly for those of us for whom English is not our first language, that would be very helpful. My name is Luz. I work at CLAIS, the Latin American Center for Solidarity Service Learning. We are based in Buenos Aires in Argentina, and we originally worked in Latin America. And in the last few years, we expanded to working not only in Latin America, but globally. So it's, for us, it's like our pride in a way, in the sense that we are going from the South globally. Most projects, most networks are led from the North, and those that not all of the ones that we participate in, but the ones that we lead are led from the South. So that's something that I wanted to mention. What we do is we promote service learning at a global level, as I said, and one of the strategies that we use for that is networking, not only for within service learning projects. Networking and community work is a central part of service learning, but also as an institutional strategy to access public policy, to access like a real transformation, not only at a community level, but at a global level. My role in CLAIS is as the coordination of institutional relations and networks. And in that line, our oldest network, let's say, is the Ibero-American Service Learning Network, which was founded in 2005, which is what I had called nested networks up to now, but I'm not sure how I will call them from now on. That is a network of national networks. When it was founded as an Ibero-American network of people or institutions interested in service learning, but with the vision of it becoming a network of national networks. And in this last over 15 years, that's where we've been moving. And now there are several national networks, service learning networks in this region. And one of the difficulties that we face now is we are simultaneously now a network of national networks and all the members that were with us before. So that's one of the challenges that we are facing now. From CLAIS, we also formed or promoted the creation of the Central and Eastern European Service Learning Network, different national networks in different continents. So it's something that we do all the time, because it's the way that we understand permits sustainability for what we promote, in the sense that we will not always have funds to do what we want to do. We don't know territories worldwide. We know those that we know. but local actors can sustain this over time. So that's basically what we do. I would like to suggest something, Seema, if you allow us. Can we add one column to the graph that you gave us through the drive, so that we may add the websites of our organizations or something of the sort? Because listening to Annalina and Motunrayo so far, I'm interested in learning more about their work, and I'm sure the same will happen when I listen to everyone. Can I do that? May I add one?
Yeah, please do it. Or if folks would just, if you want to add a hyperlink or a URL under your organizations, whichever.
Okay.
Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead and paste that in. So yeah, I think that's a great idea for folks who want to explore a little bit further. Thank you so much for sharing that. It sounds like there's a lot of layers to what is already a complex configuration in general. So I appreciate you sharing all of that. Maybe there will be space for others, I think, to share. We'd love to hear from others about your own nested network experiences. I want to go ahead and ask the next question, because I think this is really going to get at the meat of why we're all here together, which is, it's a challenging space to work in, networks in general, but what we're talking about is nested networks and this idea that there is a single organization that is serving as the primary catalyst or the host of that network. And so that comes with unique challenges. So I want to ask both Annalina and Motunrayo, how are you navigating this within your networks, with your network members? What have you tried, or what are you thinking of trying? I heard some sort of references to like entering new stages and shifting. And where have you had successes and positive results in overcoming any of the challenges that you've had? So a lot of questions, but sort of take it wherever you feel comfortable.
I can kick off, and then if you want to jump in. So the Education Champion Network, I'm just going to abbreviate to ECN, if that's okay. So it launched in 2017, and we have grown quite a lot in that time. So the network is now kind of 80 plus people across, I think it's 9 countries now. One of the things that has definitely been coming up a lot is there is no doubt that we're of agreement about the big mission, kind of girls' access to secondary school education. But because of the different contexts, and because some of our chapters, so this is the national level groups, have been part of the network longer, they're obviously bigger, and they have kind of experienced more and done more collective work together. And so I would say the challenges that are coming up are sustainability. So what we're finding at some of the chapter level is, actually, what does this network look like? When they say outside of Malala Fund, not that they don't want to be attached to it, but it's like they in their own right are a name and a network at the national level. So what does that mean? Will Malala Fund ever change its strategy? If that was the case, what would that mean for the network and for the chapter level stuff? We won't. We care about girls' secondary education, so that's not really a worry, but that's the challenge that's coming up. Another challenge, well, I feel like challenges, but another sort of question that's coming up is how can network members have more ownership and more say about the direction of the network? As the network grows, what kind of members do we want in the ECN? Kind of what are our core principles? And although we name them, what does that mean by definition? How does that shape what countries we may or may not go to? Do network members influence that, or is that just something as Malala Fund will do strategy because we host the ECN? What else is coming up? I think some other things that have just escaped me now. But some of the ways in which we're addressing this is at the global level. So we have launched a global steering committee. And so we have representatives from each national chapter, and those representatives were selected by their own national chapter to make sure that, it was fair. And so that global steering committee is still quite new in its iteration, so I can't speak for, you know, great successes, but I can say that that's become really important in addressing some of these core kind of strategic questions that are coming up around how you know, champions, network members actually influence the direction of the network. I think there's also something around re-education within Malala Fund about what networks are and how you leave space to let them shift and change, because, you know, for those that were there at the core 2017, you know, you only have a few members to our 80 plus, it, you know, things are shifting. So it's like, how do you do that at the same time? And I think maybe one of the other challenges that we have is Malala Fund is, I mean, I don't know what you classify as a small organization, but I'll say small but mighty in the amount of work that we do. And so you have the organization doing a lot of stuff and the network is doing a lot of stuff, but making sure that that's, I don't know if I should say like in tandem with one another, but to make sure, you know, the organization is not running ahead of decisions that might impact the network and they're not involved in it. So I would say the biggest thing that we're doing right now is that global steering committee, but also finding opportunities for, I guess, kind of champions to take some sort of like leadership, strategic or influencing role in the organization. Like I said, it's still quite new, so I can't say, you know, over the past 3 years, we've achieved X, Y, Z. But just to say that's like, you know, a big thing and kind of a new way of working. But I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. And I think also positive for champions themselves to feel that we are open to hearing, and not just hearing in a sort of tokenistic sense, but actually this steering committee will influence and actually proactively and actively contribute to sort of strategies and principles and network charters that kind of influence the direction of the ECN. I'm going to stop there because I feel like I'm going to start rambling, so I'll pass over to Annalina.
No, I love that. You set it up so perfectly, because I didn't realize when you guys had started, but we're almost at like the same timeline in the growth of our networks. Yours is 2017, ours is 2018. And it's so fascinating, even though yours is global and has those chapters with working with different contexts, which sounds really like exciting but challenging. But we're also figuring out this question of what does member leadership in the network look like when you are bound by another entity's operation structures, decision-making structures, governance, strategy, mission. And so I just really appreciated hearing that and thinking about the same timeline of that trajectory. And maybe there's something around that 5-year mark where you're like, oh, we have our foundation, we have our feet on the ground now. Like, it's been awesome. You know, one thing that's been really great for the Food Systems Leadership Network has been tapping into the resources that the Wallace Center and the larger agency have, because they've had the, you know, established relationships so that we could have consistent funding for the last 5 years, which then could provide consistent programming to network members. But with that consistency and, like, you know, building network cohesion comes, well, we want member leadership. We want members to be in decision-making roles, and we don't want Wallace Center staff to be the ones like ultimately making the decisions. So we've just embarked on a year-long strategy planning session to guide the future of the network and to set objectives and priorities. And one thing that has come up is the need to explore what governance looks like within the network and how that relates to decision-making within the Wallace Center. And we're really excited to explore that question, and are also going to be getting together, not necessarily a steering committee, but like a possible transition team to be like, what does that process look like when you like unnest yourself from an institution or from an entity? Because, you know, at the end of the day, like right now where we're at, and this might be a little bit different with the Malala Fund, but the Wallace Center is ultimately responsible for writing the grants, for managing funder relationships. Like, it's our name, it's our brand at the end of the day that is responsible to higher entities and as well as to the success of the network. And so shifting that to member leadership responsibility as well, and to like a more like network responsibility is something that we're exploring. So yeah, and then I guess maybe like one other challenge that just to harp on a little bit more, which is maybe a little bit more specific, but another reason for catalyzing this more exploratory phase of network development and member leadership is around being tied to an institution that has really stringent operation policies and procurement policies and finance policies. And like, that's great in the beginning when you're getting started. You don't have to worry about any of that. You can just do your programming. But now that we are more into having grant programs, working with our partners, like paying them fairly and equitably, and now we're stuck within this institution that has extremely strict guidelines that make it so difficult for us to move money to partner with people. And that is totally inhibiting us from leaning into member leadership as well. So there's both like the macro big picture and then also the like day-to-day. And those two are kind of coming to a head more in the last year or so.
Yeah, this is bringing up a lot for me as well, having also worked for a nested network in the past. But I would love to hear about what is resonating with others around what both Motunrayo and Annalina shared, and if anybody else has similar experiences or this idea of stages of transition and sort of growth phases. So yeah, please go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, well, I'm Michelle. I'm now in London, but I'm from Italy. And I just discovered that I've been part of a nested network since 2018. I actually co-founded a nested network, but I didn't know that it was a nested network. So basically in 2018, with Chatham House and a German foundation, Robert Bosch, we created this Euro-African network and platform to allow young people to think about, like to interact with, among themselves, and to reach out decision makers, to develop policy and then reach out decision makers. And actually it's embedded within Chatham House. So all the admin stuff is made by like people inside the institution, but actually all the activities are then carried out by us. And my question, since it's kind of an age-related network, so it's supposed to kind of engage people from 22 till 30 years, and I crossed the line as many of the other members. And so since we are kind of turning the 50 years of existence, but basically like pretty much at the same stage, I was wondering how to create some kind of institutional memory. So when network members, and in particular like the co-founders, will be leaving, or like as now like are leaving, how to ensure that the collective knowledge of the network and not just of the institution would be preserved. Because there is the risk that, well, Chatham can have like new people, new admin, but then if the network is not able to kind of pass the learning from generation to generation, that might be a problem a couple of years. So I don't know if any of you had similar experience. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I really appreciated that. I don't have an answer. I have some ideas, but I think that like the steering committee method that Motunrayo was talking about is a cool way to engage past network members as well, or past staff who might be moving into a different role, but still really like excited about the existing work of your network. Work members to connect people, to do programming, to like be a sounding board. And that's also like another way to keep engagement going in a less intensive way. But yeah.
Just to kind of share a bit of the Malala Fund experience. So there was a time where we were exploring what it was, the terminology, but I don't know if it never really stuck. We decided we didn't like it, but sort of alumni networks. So it's like for people who were either maybe leaving the organization that was attached to the ECN, or maybe just didn't have the capacity for whatever reason, but still wanted to be kind of connected because they enjoyed the work. There was this idea that, you know, do we create like a network of alumni so they're still there and we bring people in? But we started to think, actually, I think that's like another, like, kind of what are the challenges that might then come with having this alumni network? So currently we've actually approached it that sort of once a champion, always a champion. And although there might not be kind of specific programmatic things, so for example, maybe not, you know, maybe a champion doesn't meet the criteria for grant funding anymore, but can they still be involved in sort of applied learning activities? So these are kind of our peer-to-peer learning or sort of expertise to champion learning opportunities. Are there opportunities for them to still get involved in sort of the collective action work and the collective advocacy work that we do? So I appreciate with your network, it's slightly different because there's the age, I don't want to say the age thing, but like the age criteria. But I wonder if there's something around, so I don't know what all the kind of core facets are of the network, but maybe there's a way to sort of say there are certain areas or certain activities in which people who are no longer part, you know, who no longer meet that age criteria, but still want to be involved and pass on knowledge to people who are coming into the network, there's an opportunity to connect them, or maybe something just as simple as like a buddy scheme. I feel like we don't pay enough attention to buddy schemes, and I think they are really great. So I know that doesn't fully answer your question because it's slightly different, but just to say this is some of the ways that we approach sort of champions who no longer meet all the criteria, but want to stay engaged in the network. And we want to keep them because we know that they have knowledge. So I don't know if there's a way to sort of adapt to your kind of your particular context, but obviously I know we have a gallery panel room of experts, so I'll be quiet and open up to anyone else.
Mentorship programs are also pretty cool, and that would be a really neat way to, you know, to transition that institutional knowledge, to pass it down, to keep it growing and keep evolving on it. And those can be pretty powerful too, for both the mentor and the mentee.
How would it work, the mentor program? How does it work? One member who mentors, like an older member who mentors a newer one, or how do you make it work?
Yeah, I'm sure there are probably different ways of hosting a mentorship program. The way that we've done it is we work with about 10 established leaders in the food movement in the US, and then connect them with 3 emerging leaders through an application-based process. And then for about 6 months, they'll work closely together on more coaching and thought partnership and leadership development, and less on the tactical, how do I do this in my program? So really like more that big picture, like development and growth. But that's what we found to be valuable, and have heard a lot of that like intergenerational knowledge exchange, which is maybe a little different than institutional knowledge, but you could probably craft the program in a way to facilitate that as well.
I like it. Thank you. Interesting.
Yeah, I'm
Thanks,
curious.
I'm taking notes.
Oh.
No, just thank you. I'm taking notes on the slides. They're gonna be
Nice. I'd be curious if, like, why were people interested in coming to the call today? Is there a specific question that anyone here is grappling with around being bundled in a network or nested in one? Or, yeah, curious to hear from some other folks too.
Yeah, I can share. Hi, everyone. My name is Sammy Saltzman. I work with an organization called Innocent Classroom, and I am a brand new director of a nested network that we're just starting to build. So essentially, Innocent Classroom started as a professional development organization, helping give educators the skills and the tools to reach the students they hadn't reached yet, especially Black, Brown, and Indigenous children who, and where I live in the United States, in Minnesota, are the children who often are the most distant from their teachers because of societal barriers, all that stuff. So we started as a program for helping teachers build relationships to connect with the kids that they hadn't reached yet and connect the kids then to the learning. Over the last 10 years of doing professional development, we have noticed and heard from a lot of the educators who we've been working with that they want to connect with other people who are doing this work. So we've grown really organically to the point of people almost demanding a network of connect me to other people who do this. I want to hear how they make it work in their space, or I'm the only teacher in my school who's really taken this up, and I want support from other teachers who maybe have a full school of people, or I'm a principal, you can imagine all the different roles. People want the support of the connections of the people around them. So I'm coming really to learn from people who have more experience and I love that you're both in your sort of 5 years in journey. So I can maybe avoid some of the pitfalls of starting and learn from your expertise of what are the best ways to start. Essentially, I've started by building just one-on-one relationships with the people who are demanding these networks and asking for support in different ways and hearing what they want, which mostly I'm hearing is regular programming, times to connect with other people and learn from them, maybe a resource library, maybe a newsletter that helps tell each other stories, even if I can't make it to an event. But I feel like I'm balancing the question right now of becoming of authenticity, I guess, of the network. Because we started as a professional development organization, we want to make an authentic space for the educators who care about our thing to share their resources, their ideas, and get support from one another. We don't want to necessarily control that conversation, but we also know that the educators who are working with are really busy people who have a lot on their plates. So balancing the question of how do we support our members versus when are we asking them too much is sort of where I'm at. And thanks for tolerating this long ramble. Great to meet you all. Thanks for having me.
Oh, that's great, Sammy. It's a really, really great experience to bring to this space. And I would love to hear from others about what they did maybe when they were first starting their nested networks, to sort of give you some additional insight if anybody wants to share. If you can remember back that far.
I'll just say, I think you're going about it in a really smart way, and developing those relationships and listening and like just being like a real human and connecting with the people who are asking for help or support. I think that's like super spot on. Something that we did not do up until recently, or something that I don't remember if we started doing immediately early on, but I recognize now is very important, and we have been instituting this, is if possible, because people are really busy, and I completely hear that challenge, and I don't have a good solution for that one. But we've been trying when possible to compensate, like financially compensate people for their time and energy that they give during like strategic planning sessions, or like when it's to advance the network versus, and like, or to share their expertise in some sort of webinar, or if they're training, or if they perhaps are leading something consistently, and trying to find that balance between when is it compensating network members and when is it giving back to the network. And also like trying to set a more like equitable pay scale for that, what it looks like when honoraria get offered, and sorting through all of that. And these are conversations that we're now having more consistently, but I think would have been good to have in the beginning too, and to build into budgets. That's been so helpful. When we recognized that we needed it, we're like, oh, let's just put like a huge line item in here for like honoraria that we can give speakers and etc.
I could, oh, Seema, were you gonna?
No, please go. Yeah, that'd be
I was
great.
gonna say, I could share
a little bit because I have some, that what you're describing, Sammy, sounds very familiar, particularly like network members just having very limited capacity and being very busy. So I'm Nicole, I use she, her pronouns. I'm the director of a network, a nested network based mostly in the States, called the Nonprofit Democracy Network. And it's basically a community of practice for social justice oriented nonprofits that are trying to restructure how they operate internally so that the way they work inside actually reflects their values externally. So shared leadership structures, equitable compensation structures, restorative justice, conflict transformation practices. You know, there are a lot of nonprofits that are really hierarchical and, you know, the white male ED makes 3 times more than the queer femmes of color who do the program work, but they're doing social justice work. So these are organizations that are trying to transform those internal dynamics. So very similarly, like these are folks who are frontline organizers and activists working in nonprofits, very limited time and capacity, and yet there's a very like deep need for the themes that the network grapples with. And so what we found, and of course we're still experimenting as we all are, but what we found is that, you know, really didn't want, especially because we're like valuing democracy and member, you know, being member driven, like it doesn't feel comfortable to be like, okay, we're gonna just develop this programming and offer it because we really want people to like provide as much input as possible. But we've actually found that like one of the first things we did was develop like a 15-month online learning journey of curriculum where we brought in a bunch of outside facilitators. So we weren't the face of it, but we were just convening a space where people would come together and people were stoked. And we really focused on in that space, building relationships with one another so that people's investment in their relationships with each other is really what keeps them showing up for the network, even when their capacity is really limited, because they feel inspired and they care about each other. So we actually did like center developing some content, even though it didn't feel super democratic, but we were like, we're going to bring this because we're hearing a call for it and we think people will show up. And we have, 220 people that are showing up. So it's been really successful. Obviously lots to learn and lots to change and grow from, but it's been a successful model so far. And now that we're like nearing the end of that, I'm in the process of thinking about, okay, how can I bring in more folks who've been engaged in this way and who are now on fire about the power of the network? How can we bring them into governance and leadership in different ways? And then I just wanted to share one other small thing about structure, and to what Annalina was speaking to about being within a rigid organization in certain ways and that being a barrier to networks. So we have a really interesting model that could be of value for folks where I'm a nested network, like I'm a director of a network of nonprofits, but I'm also have a host organization. I'm a fiscally sponsored project of another organization. So really they are kind of like the host organization, but they very intentionally did not make this a project of the program, but chose to fiscally sponsor us. So we have autonomy. And so they have some staff who sit on our, we call it a stewardship circle. They'd send some staff to our stewardship circle. But if those staff were to leave at some point, either leave the organization or decide they don't want to do this work anymore, and no other staff came, we could still survive as an entity because of our fiscal sponsorship structure. And it allows people who are not staff and who are staff in other organizations who aren't staff at that host organization to still be on the stewardship committee, which if it were an internal program, it would be much harder to do that. So it's kind of an interesting, and now we're considering doing that, providing fiscal sponsorship for our members, for them to have some autonomy as they develop sort of like revolutionary organizational structures for themselves. So this is like a nesting Russian doll, like nested network situation, but just thought I'd share some of those experiences.
I was just going to add one thing around authentic. Sorry, I saw Gladys unmuted. I'm going to let Gladys speak.
Go ahead.
No, please, Gladys, go ahead.
Well, we have a network that is basically a network about mutual aid in Northwest Arkansas that has the pandemic really kind of put a lot of groups into operation, but none of us really knew what we were doing. And I really have been very interested in the series that you've done, Simo, because we're really kind of trying to figure out what is governance for a kind of a loose network like this. And I get hints every time that I get to come to these, but it is difficult to actually kind of figure out how to pull the connections together in ways that empower us, but don't get in the way of how it operates. So it's just really interesting watching and hearing the stories, because it's never been a boring session, because every single network has been so fascinating.
I second that.
I was only going to add a short thing around authenticity because I thought that was quite interesting. And, I have to admit, we're quite lucky, because I would say Malala Fund is not a rigid organization. I think Malala Fund itself, in the grand scheme, when it comes to our programming, hasn't actually been around. Like the ECN was our first program. So although the organization was existing before then, things are still new and we're trying things out. I would say one thing that I think you are ahead of us when we started is that it does sound like this is coming out of a need and a request from the educators. So although you started this program around professional development, the fact that they're saying, actually, we want this, I do think for me, I wouldn't have any concern around authenticity because of that. I guess one of the things that I would say, which is a learning from when I've joined Malala Fund and seeing how the network is developing and shaping, is really just ensuring that you have, I'm like, how do I frame this? Kind of like the foundation that it is a network. Like, I think often people slap the word network on, but aren't ready to kind of go with the ebbs and flows, because that is networks. They're loose and dynamic and they change, and we have to create space for that. And just to add on to what Nicole was saying, I think the other interesting thing is, again, getting that balance between, we want to be led by you. We want members to feel like they're centered and they own the network, but because they're so busy, sometimes it's like, actually, we are going to present this to you. And I think sometimes there's nothing wrong with presenting as long as you have really good feedback mechanisms. So when they are feeding this back, you then are able to kind of meaningfully and intentionally reshape things as they go forward. So this sounds all very cryptic in my head. I don't know why, but I hope this is coming across. But that's just kind of one of the only things I wanted to add. It's not much, but I think, yeah, I mean, the other thing actually, which has been a challenge for us, and maybe this is more networks rather than nested networks, has actually just been also not over consulting the network members. I don't know if anyone else has had that, but almost been like, you're asking us there's too many surveys. Like, we don't want to give you any more feedback. So I think just trying to kind of like get that balance and understand. And I think it's a work in progress. It's never perfect, but I don't know. I think you're starting at the right place, but I think definitely kind of, I think one thing that we probably didn't have, because even though Malala Fund created the network, it was still kind of organic in some ways, but just having really good kind of like principles and like at the beginning, and knowing that that's going to change. And it doesn't have to be like there's only 2 people, but I think identifying at what stage you'll have some kind of principle. It doesn't even have to be a formal charter, but then putting in time that that's going to be looked at again. I think that is a big thing that I think is really useful. It doesn't have to be right at the start, but I think on reflection, we probably left it too late to start having those conversations. Never too late, but I hope you know what I mean. It would have been easy if it was earlier, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you all so much for your help. I'm furiously scribbling notes over here. No, I really appreciate all of what you shared, especially the balance between offering content and support and making space for folks to step up and offer or share themselves. And I think there's something huge in what Annalina was saying too about offering people compensation when they advance the network and still making an authentic space for sharing and relationship building and things like that outside of those moments. So this has given me a lot to think about. Thank you all.
Yeah, same. This is fantastic. I'm furiously taking notes myself. This is such a rich conversation. Any parting thoughts as we're getting close to the top of the hour?
I was just going to say, like, capacity, one thing that is emerging for me in this is that capacity is not static. Like, people's capacity is not static. It's a function of many things, which include like the oppression of capitalism, but also people's motivation and desire for things and joy. And for many people, relationship is directly related to motivation. And so, yeah, having busy members like doesn't necessarily, like, if people aren't showing up, it's not only because they're busy.
Another thing that I get from a lot of these sessions is great quotes. That was great, Nicole. I so appreciate that. I wish we had more time. I always wish we had more time. This has been such a phenomenal conversation. Sammy, I think your question was just a great jumping off point for a lot of really interesting and insightful thoughts and sharings and learnings. And I so appreciate you asking that. Thank you both so much. Motunrayo, Annalina, thank you so much. I don't want to take a look at the last two slides of the slide deck. I won't go over all the details, but join us for more sessions, glean some more insights, share, offer your time to us to share some of your thoughts and experiences too. We would love to hear them and share them. And you can also provide feedback on these sessions. But that's all I have. Thank you so much. Yes, such great insights. I'm going to try and consolidate all of this and write it into a blog that sort of summarizes all of these great thoughts together. And we'll send that out in the next week or two. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Seema,
Yes.
I was late and I did not get the instructions on the slides, and I can't seem to get those links to open to us to slides.
Oh, sure. Yeah, let me reshare that with you, Gladys. Hold on. Okay, I just pasted it back in the chat. Let me know if that works for you. But what I'll also actually I'm going to PDF the slides and I'll include a link to them in the thank you email.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to our panelists again, and hope to see all of your faces again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Nice seeing you all.
Bye. Thank you so
Bye.
much.